Hello everyone and welcome back to Lucidate. Today we're diving into a pivotal aspect of machine learning, the design and optimization of transformer models, particularly large language models or LLMs. We'll be discussing how to determine the ideal size of these models in terms of their parameters, attention heads and more. While this task can seem overwhelming, there are heuristic methods at our disposal to arrive at an optimum answer. But first, let's take a moment to recap what large language models and transformers are and why they're so significant in today's technological landscape. Over the past few years, there's been an obsessive trend leaning towards the creation of increasingly larger language models. However, bigger isn't always better. Larger models demand more computational resources, and there's compelling evidence suggesting that many such models might be oversized given their respective computational budgets. Put simply, we've been building models that are larger than necessary, leading to inefficient resource utilization. So how do we determine the optimal size for a transformer model? This is the question that many researchers have been grappling with. They're examining two crucial factors. Given a fixed volume of computation used for training, known as flops, what's the trade-off between the number of parameters in the model and the number of training tokens utilized? By understanding the relationship between these two factors, they're attempting to optimize the size and shape of their models. Essentially, the key question is, given a fixed flops budget, how should one trade off model size and number of training tokens? One human analogy here is that you can have a massive brain, but if you don't receive the right training or education, you will not be able to use it optimally. Should you choose more brain power or more education? Let's illustrate these principles with a real-world example. We'll compare the performance of two models developed by Alphabet's DeepMind. The models are called Gopher and Chinchilla. Gopher is the larger model, while Chinchilla has been trained with more tokens. The result might surprise you. Despite being smaller, Chinchilla managed to outperform Gopher using the same computational resources. This suggests that investing in the volume of training data could potentially yield better performance than simply scaling up the model size. Here we can see two charts with a range of relevant benchmarks. The orange bars indicate by how much Chinchilla beat Gopher in each test, while the blue bars show Gopher's wins. As you can see, this isn't even close to a tie. Chinchilla wins at nearly every benchmark. Chinchilla chose to spend more time at school studying more subjects rather than adding more brain power, and the results speak for themselves. Let's go beneath the surface and explore the technical aspects of model scaling. There are two primary strategies for estimating the ideal size of transformer models. The first one is a heuristic that relates model size, dataset size, and computational resources. The second one is empirical, involving a study of over 400 different sized LLMs. The first approach, known as the compute data model size heuristic, was conceptualized by firms like OpenAI. They found that as they increased the number of parameters, the performance of their models increased. As adding more parameters was always leading to greater performance, and this showed no sign of diminishing with scale, there was frankly little incentive to challenge the orthodoxy of simply building a bigger brain. Under this approach, for a 10x increase in compute budget, the number of parameters would increase by 5.5 times and the amount of training data by 1.8. The second approach, Chinchilla Scaling Laws, found that parameter sizing and token amounts should be increased in the same proportion. So for a 10x increase in compute budget, you would increase the parameters by 3.3 and the tokens also by 3.3. This was based on empirical observations on training over 400 models, with parameters ranging from 70 million to 16 billion, and on 5 billion to 500 billion tokens. You can see that in the chart on the screen in the top left, for comparable compute budgets, the Chinchilla model has opted for a much smaller model size than other models, but it chose to be trained on between 4 to 8 times as many tokens. It chose to utilize its finite resource of flops during training to be exposed to more data rather than having more parameters. Again, opting for a smaller brain but more time spent at college studying more subjects. The Chinchilla results found that a smaller model trained with more tokens could achieve comparable or even superior performance for the same compute budget. This observation challenges the prior trend of obsessively creating larger and larger models, emphasizing the importance of a balanced approach to model scaling. Based on their analysis of over 400 models of varying size, the Chinchilla team were able to devise a couple of parametric equations based on model performance to specify the optimal number of parameters and tokens given the compute budget measure in flops. And these equations are shown on your screen. So, in theory, these principles are great, but seeing them in practice is what truly demonstrates their value. Let's look at a case study where a development team successfully applied the Chinchilla Scaling Laws. Let's see how they used them to help them design the size and shape of their large language model. We'll focus on an industry-specific LLM, BloombergGPT, designed for financial markets. The Bloomberg team set out to build a decoder-only causal language model, leveraging a transformer architecture. The Chinchilla Scaling Laws guided the model's size and shape. In the paper describing the architecture, the team claimed that their total compute budget was 1.3 million GPU hours on 40 gigabyte A100 NVIDIA GPUs. If we look at the NVIDIA spec sheet for the A100, we can see what the benchmarked teraflops per second is for this specific hardware. Now, this is likely to be a theoretical maximum that assumes 100% efficiency. Memory bandwidth limitations, latency, and pipeline stalls will mean that this is tough to achieve in practice, and we'll address this a little later. But for now, let's note this theoretical maximum and convert it to scientific notation. 1.56 times 10 to the power 14. The 1.3 million GPU hours can be converted into seconds, and for consistency, we'll represent this as 4.68 times 10 to the 9 seconds. Therefore, multiplying these two together, the budget equates to 7.3 times 10 to the 23 floating point operations. With reference to the paper again, the adoption of checkpointing acts as a kind of tax on the flops utilised, so we'll need to apply a scaling factor of 75% to this number of flops. As mentioned earlier, we're unlikely to achieve the maximum rated capability of this hardware. We'll assume we get a 66% of the specified compute power, meaning that our total budget is 3.61 times 10 to the 23 flops. If we plug this into the Chinchilla Scaling Laws for approach 1, we get pretty close to the number of parameters that Bloomberg state in their paper. The difference is likely to be an overestimation on my behalf of the efficiency of the A100. Once we have the number of parameters, it's a matter of applying some further empirical formulae and some best practices to get the other model parameters. The approximate formula for the number of parameters is shown on your screen. The number of layers multiplied by the hidden dimension multiplied by the number of attention heads plus the vocabulary size multiplied by the hidden dimension. We know that the parameters that we want is approximately 50 billion, and the vocabulary size for BloombergGPT is 131,072 tokens. The Bloomberg paper also acknowledges some constraints and best practices. Some work by Levine et al. Forms an optimal relationship between the number of layers and the hidden dimension size. Furthermore, it's best practice to have the hidden dimension evenly divisible by the number of attention heads. And for optimal tensor performance on the GPU, it's preferable to have the hidden dimension to be a multiple of 8. This leaves us with an optimal model as shown in the table. So you see, the Chinchilla Scaling Laws, while a theoretical concept, has practical applications in guiding the design of large-scale transformer models. This example should inspire confidence in you that these laws, rules, heuristics, and best practices can effectively guide the design and scaling of your own models. If you wanted to build this model, it's a relatively simple thing to code with the Hugging Face Transformers library. Here's the code. However, unless you have access to a vast computing surface with loads of RAM on your CPU and GPU, this is unlikely to be a successful endeavor. As you'd expect, these models are too large to be hosted on a home PC, unlike the smaller models in some of the prior Lucidate videos. To sum up, our exploration today suggests that the future of language model development may necessitate a shift in our scaling strategies. Instead of focusing only on creating larger models, we should also strive to maximize the utility of our training data. By striking a balance between model size and training data volume, we can create more efficient and more powerful language models. Thank you for joining us today on this deep dive into optimizing transformer model sizes. If you found this video insightful, do give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the world of machine learning. For exclusive content, consider joining as a Lucidate member. Until next time.